Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping right out of the mundane and plunging headfirst into a grim, dark, gothic fable. We're decoding a wild, profound narrative called Sapphire Ink and the Siege of Hightime. Now, this isn't just your standard story. No, it's basically a psychological thriller slammed together with some deep Nietzschean philosophy. We're going to witness this brutal siege, a war between the rigid structures of the self and this chaotic, liberating entity that actually names itself the Nichtmensch, basically the voice of the not-self. So let's watch a supposedly perfect world violently unravel, shall we?
Our parable kicks off at the absolute origin point of the human ego. Picture this: a lone scribe sitting in a meticulously perfect limestone chamber, measuring exactly 6 paces by 4. He dips a steel quill into ink, writes the words "I am," and boom, he's attempting to bind all of reality. It's that deep human desperation we all have to categorize, name, and just control the universe, right? He honestly believes his grammar's absolute, like he can just shut out the dark, unpredictable chaos lurking right outside his walls. He wants to dictate the whole of reality with a single, firm stroke of his pen.
But here's the catch. This act of definitive creation, it's actually an act of absolute imprisonment. The text calls this a Fichtean cell. By declaring, "I am," the scribe is essentially drawing a hard, inescapable boundary right around himself. I mean, have you ever boxed yourself in with your own rigid rules or, stubborn daily routines? That is exactly what is happening here. And this isn't a prison locked from the outside, it's a heavy stone cage forged entirely by his own mask of reason. He thinks he's totally mastered reality, but really, he's just hiding from a sprawling, chaotic purgatory.
So this perfectly sets the stage for a really devastating philosophical battle. On one side, you have the scribe representing the self. That's the rigid architecture of the state, the desperate clinging to absolute order. And opposing him, the voice of the not-self, the Nichtmensch. And this entity wields a truly terrifying weapon, the ink blot of Hightime. Now, this ink blot isn't just some accident on a page. No, it is a literal wet drop of raw, unshaped potentiality. It's the exact chaos the scribe has spent centuries denying, and now it's being used as a literal siege engine crashing against his fragile canvas.
And let me tell you, the siege that follows is swift and total. First, that single wet drop of raw potentiality shatters those heavy stone walls like glass. The definitive ink lines of the scribe's world just violently dissolve. From that immense friction, a blinding sapphire light erupts out of nowhere. And in an instant, the illusion of modern progress, all of the scribe's prized Art Deco towers, crumbles backward into rusted Arthurian armor. We are suddenly plunged headfirst into this dark Camelot psychodrama, where all the normal rules of logic are just completely suspended.
To the scribe, this sudden, blinding sapphire light is absolutely terrifying. He looks at it and mistakes it for unclean sorcery. But in the context of our fable, this light is actually an eruption of severe, unflinching intellectual honesty. It's acting as the ultimate weapon of narrative contamination, if you will. It's basically a philosophical solvent that strips away the hollow meaning of the scribe's words, illuminating the rotting canvas of a state and all the institutional lies holding the whole thing together.
But this blinding honesty definitely does not arrive alone. Oh no. From the very friction of the dissolving ink, the spirit siblings of Hightime are summoned. These are dark, potent manifestations of the not-self, completely awakened from the abyss with one single purpose: to violently dismantle whatever is left of the scribe's artificial state. They are the undeniable, in-your-face proof that the kingdom's so-called righteous order was just a temporary script, written over a much, much older and darker truth.
First a step from that abyss is the wit, manifesting as a priestly jester. But listen, do not expect any juggling or lighthearted jokes here. The only punchline in this show is the total destruction of the scribe's worldview. By wearing the motley of a fool and the robes of a priest, the jester exists to actively, brutally mock the righteous law of the kingdom. He represents that terrifying, mocking laughter right at the edge of the abyss, aggressively stripping away the institutional fabrications we use to, comfort ourselves.
But beneath all that mocking laughter lies an immense psychological weight. See, the jester drafts contracts of negation. He is explicitly named in the text as the not-self the self cannot abide. He is a literal theological nightmare whose sole job is to sign the death warrants of old gods in their hollow iron shells. Yet, and here's the deep Fictarian tragedy of it all, he is a prisoner of his own predetermined rebellion. His entire identity is locked into destroying a world he can never replace. He's burdened by the devastating weight of being a necessary destroyer, forever bound to tear down but never allowed to build.
Following the jester, his monstrous siblings arrive to feast on the ruins, and let me tell you, their diets are entirely psychological. First up is the Hunger, a cosmic mind acting basically as a bard of the abyss. The Hunger consumes the forbidden knowledge that the kingdom's pale inquisitor desperately tried to hide away in an iron stove. And right beside him crouches the small gargoyle, this stunted little creature who feeds entirely on the corrupted noble shadows of citizens, the ones who foolishly mistook their heavy chains for a rusted crown.
Let's look a bit closer at the Hunger for a second. This blue-eyed fiend wields sapphire science, violently drinking the living sapphire ink that the scribe had been guarding in his hollow grail. By consuming the very grammar of the empire, the Hunger proves a really devastating point. The scribe's grand historical quest for truth, it was always a lie. Have you ever felt like society's progress is just a treadmill going nowhere? That's exactly what this represents. A controlled, predictable cycle of revolt and reset, designed specifically to keep the kingdom stagnant and totally secure against any real, meaningful change.
Then, of course, there is the gargoyle. Now he grows monstrously large, simply by feeding on the rot beneath the kingdom's gilding. And through this consumption, he exposes the kingdom's grand monuments as absolute frauds. These monuments weren't built on virtue, not at all. They were forged from the crushing command of "thou shalt," literally, the voice of a historical dragon demanding absolute obedience. The gargoyle forces the scribe to stand there and watch his very identity just bubble away beneath the crushing weight of these institutional lies.
All of this brings us right to the climax of our psychodrama. The jester, carrying that crushing psychological weight of his absolute negation, finally steps up to confront the ultimate symbol of the scribe's law, the Knight of the Iron Word. Now, you'd probably expect some epic cinematic battle here, right? But the tragedy of the jester is that his victory is incredibly hollow. Beneath the sheer gravity of the jester's truth, the knight doesn't even fight. He simply crumbles into the dust of his own dead morality. The ultimate defender of the scribe's truth is exposed as completely empty, sweeping the entire kingdom into the gray twilight of an unwritten horizon.
In the aftermath of all this destruction, the voice of the Nichmensch delivers a really chilling truth. These entities, they did not come as saviors. They do not offer a new paradise or some comforting dream to replace the old one. The Nichmensch acts purely as an impartial mirror, and that mirror reveals the absolute harshest reality. The scribe's beloved righteous order was really just the chaos and darkness he denied the loudest. The destruction wasn't malicious at all. It was simply the inevitable collapse of a hollow illusion that could no longer sustain itself.
Which brings us to the profound conclusion of our explainer today. The Fichtean cell is shattered. The monuments to static morality are completely gone. All that remains is the unvarnished world and the raw potentiality of wet ink. The scribe is no longer trapped, sure, but now he is completely untethered, facing the absolute existential terror of true freedom. So I leave you with this final thought. When the comfortable illusions of your own rigid structures are dissolved by undeniable intellectual honesty, what is the heavy burden of the next line you will write with your own trembling hand?